So hello students. Now that you've understood the pharynx, you've got an orientation to the pharynx and larynx, you've understood where the larynx is with respect to the pharynx, right? It's in front of the hypopharynx, it's within the pharynx. Let us understand the details of the larynx now, right? You know where the larynx is located, you know how the larynx is. So let us understand the cartilages of the larynx. Cartilages of the larynx. How do we divide the cartilages of the larynx? So we have cartilages, we have muscles of the larynx. So the cartilages are divided as paired and unpaired. Paired and unpaired. Now, which are the paired cartilages and which are the unpaired? Unpaired ones, let me begin like this. The unpaired cartilages of the larynx, one is the thyroid cartilage, thyroid, okay, that's an unpaired single cartilage. Below the thyroid is this C-shaped cartilage, that's a cricoid cartilage, which is unpaired. There's a cartilage which goes up from the thyroid, an elastic cartilage. What is that? Epiglottis. Epiglottis. Thyroid and cricoid are hyaline cartilage. Hyaline. So this becomes the three unpaired cartilages of larynx: the thyroid, the cricoid, the epiglottis. Now, which are the paired ones? Paired ones. Now, cricoid is a C-shaped structure. Sitting on the cricoid are these two arytenoids. Look at this. Sitting on the cricoid, this is one arytenoid. This is the second arytenoid. They're sitting on the cricoid, and the arytenoid will have two processes: muscular process and the vocal process. The vocal process of the arytenoid cartilage gives attachment to the vocal cords. Vocal cords. Vocal cords will begin from the arytenoid cartilage and they would be going to the thyroid cartilage, right? Now, from this epiglottis to the arytenoids, from the epiglottis to the arytenoids, what is this known as? The aryepiglottic folds. Aryepiglottic folds, right? So now what is this structure that we have drawn here? This structure is the larynx. This structure that we have drawn, this structure that we have drawn is the larynx, and if we go down from the larynx, you get the C-shaped cartilages here. What is this? Trachea. That's a trachea. What is this structure that we have drawn? The larynx. Clear? So cartilages of the larynx are clear. Unpaired ones, the thyroid, the cricoid, the epiglottis. The paired ones are the arytenoids. And what are these folds? These are the aryepiglottic folds. Inside the aryepiglottic folds, there are two cartilages which are paired. Yes, two paired cartilages. What is this known as? Corniculate. Corniculate. And the second one is the cuneiform. Cuneiform cartilage. So corniculate and cuneiform. Right. So this structure is the larynx. You clear? Keep paired and unpaired. Now, students, if you can tell me who's this behind the larynx. If I draw something here behind the larynx, what's that? This is the pharynx. And what is this pharynx? The laryngopharynx. And what is this level of cricoid? C6. And below this, what is this? Esophagus. So below C6, the pharynx becomes the esophagus. The larynx becomes the trachea below C6. Clear? Now, coming to the muscles of the larynx, students, not that all muscles are important, but you should know this vocal cords. You know, when we shout, when we talk in a loud voice, that pitch of the voice, you get a high-pitched voice. And this high-pitched voice is because the vocal cords are tensed. Tensor of the vocal cords. Now, this is something that you have to know. Tensor of the vocal cords is, that's a very important MCQ, tensor of the vocal cords. And why the vocal cords has to be tensed? Because when the vocal cords are tensed, you get a pitch to the voice. So tensor of the vocal cords is a muscle which is known as cricothyroid. Cricothyroid muscle. So tensor of the vocal cords is cricothyroid muscle, and which is the nerve supplying this cricothyroid muscle. The nerve supplying this cricothyroid muscle is the nerve supplying the cricothyroid muscle is external laryngeal nerve. External laryngeal nerve, which is a branch of superior laryngeal, which is a branch of vagus. That means vagus gives one external laryngeal which divides into vagus gives the superior laryngeal nerve which divides into an external and internal laryngeal. The external laryngeal nerve is going to supply what? Cricothyroid. Clear? And what is the action of cricothyroid? Tensor of the vocal cords. Now, students, if this cricothyroid is paralyzed, if this external laryngeal nerve is damaged, cricothyroid is paralyzed, the person doesn't get a pitch to the voice. The person talks in a very low pitched voice. Hey, what's your name? Hey, what's your name? Like that. And this condition is known as huskiness of voice. Huskiness of voice. Or this is also known as, what is asked in the MCQ is loss of timbre. Loss of timbre of the voice. Okay, so paralysis of cricothyroid results in huskiness of voice or loss of timbre of the voice. What is this condition? In this condition, the vocal cords cannot be tensed. Perfect. So that's tensor of the vocal cords. Now there's something else. Now this vocal cords has to be abducted so that the passage remains intact. So abductor of the vocal cords. Another very important MCQ, abductor of vocal cords is posterior cricoarytenoid. Abductor of vocal cords is posterior cricoarytenoid. Remember this. If this posterior cricoarytenoid is paralyzed, the vocal cords adduct, the person will die because the passage of airway is closed, right? So abductor of vocal cords is posterior cricoarytenoid, tensor of vocal cords is cricothyroid. Perfect, students? Okay, just have a look at the slides now. You know this, we have seen this slide in the earlier lectures. This is the larynx. Okay, this is the larynx. Now that's the pharynx. If I close this, the larynx is inside the pharynx. These are the aryepiglottic folds. And now if we enter into this folds, if we go inside this aryepiglottic folds, we go inside the larynx. We go inside the larynx. Now, what do we do, students? We are cutting this larynx. Okay, we'll cut this larynx and we will open the larynx. We'll cut the larynx from behind and we will open the larynx. Look what is seen. When we cut the larynx, we open the larynx. That's the epiglottis. Look at that. That's the epiglottis. These are the aryepiglottic folds, right? Now, inside the larynx, we find two folds. We find two folds. What do we call this fold as? Upper fold and lower fold. You can see two folds here. The upper fold is known as the vestibular fold. Vestibular fold. And the lower one is known as the vocal fold. Vestibular fold and the vocal fold. So the upper one are the vestibular folds and the lower one are the vocal folds. We have opened it like this, right? So vocal folds and vestibular folds will be two in number. One here, two like this, two like this. We have opened the larynx like this. So this are the vestibular folds and this are the vocal folds. The space between the vestibular and the vocal folds, you can see a gap here, students. Can you see a gap here? Now this gap is known as the sinus or ventricle of larynx. Sinus of larynx or ventricle of the larynx. Clear? Now, if I bring it close, if I close the larynx, suppose if we close the larynx, this are the two vestibular folds, these are the two vocal folds. Okay, look, I'll make a slide for you. Now we close the larynx. These are the two vestibular folds above. These are the two vocal folds below. Right? These are the two vocal folds. These are the two vestibular folds. These are the two vocal folds. The space between the two vestibular folds, you can see the space between the two vestibular folds, this space, and there's a space between the two vocal folds. This is what we call as rima vestibuli. Rima vestibuli, that's a space between the two vestibular folds, and this is what we call as rima glottitis. That's a space between the two vocal folds, right? And between the vestibular and the vocal folds, students, between the vestibular and the vocal folds on either sides, what is that? Sinus of the larynx. Sinus or the ventricle of the larynx. Are you able to follow this? So just the important thing about larynx, what is important, I'm telling you. So rima vestibuli, rima glottitis is a space between the vestibular folds, vocal folds, and between them is the sinus. Now look at this. That's a section. We've taken a section huh, a sagittal section through the larynx. So now you tell me, what is this fold? That's a vestibular fold. What is this for? Vocal fold. And what is this? Sinus of the larynx. Sinus of the larynx. That's the epiglottis here. Now, what is this behind? What is this behind? That's the pharynx, right? What is this pharynx? That's the laryngopharynx. And below this, what is this? Esophagus. Esophagus. We've seen all this. Clear to all of you? Look at this. So that's the thyroid, that's the cricoid, this is the hyoid. What is this membrane known as? This is the thyrohyoid membrane. Just remember, that's a very important MCQ. Between the thyroid and the hyoid bone, there's a membrane, thyrohyoid membrane. And students, can you see there's a gap here? There's someone who's piercing this thyrohyoid membrane. That's the internal laryngeal nerve. Internal laryngeal nerve and the superior laryngeal vessels. Internal laryngeal nerve and the superior laryngeal vessels are going to pierce this thyrohyoid membrane. They are going inside this. Now they will pass between the middle and the inferior constrictor muscles of the pharynx. They will enter inside the hypopharynx. Now from there they will go into the larynx and they will supply the sensory supply of the larynx above the vocal folds. So that's how the internal laryngeal nerve does. We've seen this internal laryngeal nerve. No, we've seen between the constrictors. So internal laryngeal nerve is outside. First, it has to go pierce the thyroid membrane. Then it goes in. Now it passes between the constrictors. It goes in the pharynx. From the pharynx, it goes to the larynx. Why? Because larynx is inside the pharynx. We know this. And then it supplies the larynx. Understanding? Clear to all of you? And these are the arytenoids. These are the vocal process. Vocal folds. Vocal folds. Clear to all of you? Now coming to this nerve supply of the larynx. Nerve supply of the larynx. Nerve supply is motor and sensory. Motor and sensory nerve supply of the larynx. Tell me, motor nerve supply. All the muscles of the larynx are supplied by. All the muscles of the larynx are supplied by recurrent laryngeal nerve. All the muscles of the larynx are supplied by recurrent laryngeal nerve except cricothyroid. Except cricothyroid, which is supplied by external laryngeal nerve. Clear? External laryngeal nerve. So all the muscles of larynx are supplied by recurrent laryngeal nerve except cricothyroid, which is supplied by external laryngeal nerve, which is a tensor of the vocal cords. And sensory nerve supply above the vocal folds, above the vocal cords, and below the vocal cords. So above the vocal cords is what? Tell me, above the vocal cords is internal laryngeal, and below the vocal cords is recurrent laryngeal nerve. Clear? Just remember this. The nerve supply of the larynx, that's a very important thing. All the muscles of the larynx are supplied by recurrent laryngeal nerve, except cricothyroid, that's external laryngeal nerve. Sensory nerve supply above the vocal folds is internal laryngeal nerve. The same internal laryngeal nerve goes up, supplies the epiglottis and the posterior most part of the tongue. That we'll see later. And below the vocal folds is supplied by the recurrent laryngeal nerve. Clear, students? Is this clear to all of you? I hope this larynx is clear to all of you. So see, in this lecture of the larynx, in the previous lecture, I have given you an orientation. Where is the larynx with respect to the pharynx? Here we've seen the muscles of the larynx, not all the muscles, but the important muscles. We've seen the cartilages, paired, unpaired. We've seen the nerve supply of the larynx, sensory and motor nerve supply. We've seen the cavity of the larynx. We've seen the two vestibular folds above, the two vocal folds below. The space between the two vestibular folds is rima vestibuli. Between the vocal folds is rima glottitis. And the space between the vestibular and the vocal folds is known as the sinus or the ventricle of the larynx. Clear, students? I hope this lecture is clear to all of you. In case of doubts, do get back to me. Okay, later I'll tell you about the vagus. I'll tell you the branches of vagus. what is superior laryngeal, what is recurrent laryngeal, and I'll tell you the branches of superior laryngeal, the external laryngeal and the internal laryngeal. So this thing would be much more clear in the subsequent lectures. Thank you to all of you students. Thank you.